So yeah, traveling and getting out there and pushing and just challenging your beliefs and your potential, then that really allows you, gives you the sort of the tools for sitting in front of a potential employer to sort of frame your mindset to achieve what you're ultimately trying to achieve, which is getting that job. You know what I mean? I think that's really important.
Hello, I'm Alan Hill. In this podcast series of the Nostalgic Vagabond, we're talking travel, all kinds of travel, with all kinds of interesting people from all around the world. In conversation, we'll share personal anecdotes, tales of adventure, and maybe misadventure too. Listen in for some unique cultural perspectives, tips from seasoned veterans, and an array of diverse experiences that have contributed to many life-changing journeys. Travel really is a privilege. We know that now. And if we can't do it right this very moment, let's talk about it then. Hey, where are you right now? On this episode of the Nostalgic Vagabond podcast, I talk with Simon Palmer. Simon has been practising architecture for well over 10 years in his home country of Australia and abroad too. The interesting thing about Simon, in discovering who he is and what path he would choose as a 20-year-old, is that his decisions stemmed from experiences abroad and the solo travels he made between studying at university and undertaking tertiary qualifications. That so-called gap year, you could say. Get a purpose. Or in his words, that cliche of finding himself. In conversation, we reminisce on times at the University of Canberra, while we were both students there in 2005, 2006-ish. Simon mentions how he felt grateful and even privileged to be allowed the opportunity to study, to realise his career ambition, to design buildings for his vocation. Simon explains in detail the events which happened in Berlin, where he was challenged about the person he was and the person he could be. This all happened in the beautifully designed Holocaust Museum in Berlin, and then his chance encounter with a soothsayer of sorts on the streets outside. We talk about savouring moments, and how at a young age Simon discovered this practice and has carried it with him throughout his life. This is interesting because it was this act, savouring moments, which caught my attention of him in the first place. I have a very visual memory of Simon enjoying an obscure beer while chilling at a university party, where the rest of the students were drinking cheap box wine as quickly as possible. No savouring at all, and not even tasting at all, most probably, because it tastes bloody awful, that box wine. Simon shares some suggestions of places to go and savour life's moments from his experiences. Places like the Greek islands, Croatia, Costa Rica, and New Zealand, surprisingly for one of the best night skies in the world. But recently Simon has found even if it's just a casual walk, run, or a bike ride in your 15-minute neighbourhood, this simple act can reinvigorate the mind, especially in COVID times. We discuss whether international experience, travel, and living abroad impacts on your job and future prospects. And to conclude, Simon tells of his thoughts on possible destinations to explore in the future in the upcoming post-COVID global experience. Anyways, let's get to the conversation. Cool. Well, we'll go from now if you're ready. Got your coffee? Okay, cool. Good morning, Simon Palmer, and thanks for getting up bright and early and coming on for a chat on the Nostalgic Vagabond podcast.
Good morning, Alan. Thank you for having me.
Yes, it's been a long time since we've seen each other. I think I was probably back in Canberra 15 or so years ago, so that's probably the last time we saw each other in the flesh.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it was a long time ago. It feels like a lifetime ago, really.
Where exactly are you right now, though, Simon?
Well, so when we first met, that was Canberra, Australia, but I'm now all the way over the pond, so to speak, over in California, USA, in a small little sleepy beachside town called Carpinteria, east of Santa Barbara, 10-minute drive.
Nice. And curiously, what's the COVID situation like in California right now? Are you guys doing okay, or are you still struggling a bit?
We were struggling for a long time, and we're now, the tide's slowly sort of turning for us, and the situation is not as dire, together with, everyone wearing masks everywhere you go, people are wearing masks. Now that the vaccinations are plentiful, I think April the 15th, I believe, is when all age groups can just go and get a vaccination. I believe it'll all go back to normal. I think the crisis of people coming down with COVID-19 will reside, but I think companies will take a little while to get their sort of governance back into order. Yeah, I feel like it's going to take a little time.
Best to be patient in these times, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, and people will be working remotely for a little while longer. And frankly, it's kind of a blessing in disguise. I'm really enjoying it.
Well, let's go and turn on a bit of the nostalgia, Simon, because we met, like we mentioned just now, back in Australia, in Canberra, in the capital city. And if my memory serves me correctly, it was way back in 2005, because we were living in this really shabby university residential block right down at the arse end of campus, like literally the last accommodation block you could get to. I have this visual memory of the night we met, because we were having a party on the campus in our residential building, and everyone knows university parties can be a bit lairish, wild, and kind of crazy. But I remember while everyone, all the students, all my colleagues and peers were drinking cheap wine, which is goon, and the cheapest beers they could find, there you were, just chilling on the side out on the veranda with a very interesting, I think it was a dark lager or some kind of exotic European-style brown beer or something. And that was just so different and intriguing to me, and kind of so mature. And then I thought, this guy seems like he's lived before he's come to university. So am I giving an accurate representation of my memory? And do you even remember what it was like for you in 2005 at university?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember vividly. Yeah, university for me wasn't... to answer your question very quickly, is that I felt privileged to sort of be there. It sounds kind of lame to say that, but give you a little bit of backstory. I didn't have university really on sort of in my sights in high school. I was just doing everything else that you could imagine, other than focusing on studying and stuff like that. And then a couple of things happened, and actually my high school teacher, Mr. Jonesy, we used to call him, he saw that I was messing around at school, and he pulled me to the side, pulled me into his office, and he said, "Look out that window. Look at all those people walking up and down the street, and the head down, looking, sad as anything. They're off to jobs that they didn't necessarily want to do. They were sort of fell into the place." And for the majority of people, that's exactly what happens. And so it's up to you, it's up to all of us as individuals to sort of take a step back, start to think about really who you are as a person and what you want to do. And at the same time, just take in and absorb every opportunity that comes your way. So between high school and university, I was fortunate enough to go with my parents over to Washington, D.C. to live for about a year and a half. They were there for like 3 or 4 years with my sister, in fact. And in that time, we went over we were in Washington, D.C. in America, because my dad got a placement there. And my sister and I, we decided, let's make the most of this and let's go over to Europe, or go over to London first, and for about 6 months. And so we did that, and we went basically working behind bars, as every Australian does at some point in their life, frankly. Working behind bars. What was the saying? We came from behind bars and we went back to work behind bars in London. So that's exactly what happened, I guess. Ironically. So working behind bars, having a great, having a lot of fun. And each week, each month, they would pay me in cash, in sterling, and I had to put that around like a waist sort of money belt and take it home with me and sort of stash it in a pillow sort of thing. And I accumulated a little bit of money after paying rent and bills and etc. And I said, oh, come on, let's take this to the next step. Why not? I'm going to get a flight over to Europe and sort of swing around Europe over the course of 2 weeks. And asked my sister, and she was interested, but she was like, I think she was having too much fun at her bar in London to consider Europe and all sorts of stuff. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to do it. So I went out by myself, flew over to Prague, and then took public transport sort of over to Germany and Berlin and down to France, etc., and then back over to London. And in doing so, I really, corny thing to say, sort of found myself, right? Started to understand what I wanted to do with my life. So then coming back to Australia, sort of fast forward, and we can come back to Europe. But fast forwarding, coming to Canberra, I then had to do an entrance exam to get into the university and not rely on my woeful scores from high school. So I had to go through sort of an entrance exam. So at that point, right up to that, and then when we were at that party, for instance, and many parties, I guess, I just felt privileged to be there because I'd gone through a process, spiritually, I guess, and definitely personally to get to that point. And so I sort of savored the moment. So I guess a good beer, a good stout was a good way to savor the moment. So that's why you saw me with that good ale.
So it was a stout, not a dark lager, but it definitely was a dark beer because I was super intrigued because it was very different to what all the rest of us were drinking. But it's interesting I
think it was a Pilsner. I think it was a dark Pilsner.
Okay. It's interesting that you used the word you felt privileged to be at university because I think most students probably just feel entitled to be at university because that's just the progress that most people take. And I think as well as the fact that you felt grateful to be able to study and go forward with your dream and your education to become an architect, which is what we were studying at the time. I think also the life experiences that you had living abroad and just the maturity and growth that you had just in that time from leaving high school to going to university made me observe that there was a different quality in you than the rest of the people who were still like 17, 18 and continuing their high school partying ways and mindsets carrying into first year university.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. I mean, I was a little bit older than everyone there, but which helps. And I think it's really I don't know. I think we all think that, we all know that life's too short, but taking a moment, even, taking a gap year, for instance, is really important to sort of, to reevaluate. Yeah. And the feeling of being left behind is, everyone worries about not being part of the community and being part of this status quo. I think that status quo is slowly changing too now, which is an important thing to add, especially with work in the workforce. 10, 15 years ago, it was heard of, but it was sort of frowned upon with people moving around every 2-3 years. Now it's sort of the status quo. It's the norm to flex, to sort of flex your professional muscles, I guess, across diverse industries, because we all can recognize that that's really beneficial.
Yeah, I know when I was going to high school, I was being brainwashed into the idea that you have to get a good grade at high school because then you get into a good university and then you can study hard at university to get a decent job. No one ever talks about life experiences when you're young or getting street smarts, maybe before book smarts or even during the time you're studying in the holiday time that you get off. I wish my teachers were telling me, go out and live, not just purely get a good grade and study because that's what you have to do. Because I don't know whether that's the complete truth. And when I see people like I saw with you at the university and how hard you were working and how focused you were working on your studies, because you really wanted to do it and you really were driven to get through and then follow your dream, whereas it seemed like the rest, even a little bit of me included too as well, because even though I was older than some, I still didn't really know what I was doing at university. I wasn't completely focused on a particular goal. I was just there because I still thought that's what the rite of passage was. I was just at university like everybody else. And there's that kind of, yeah, I'm here because this is just what you do. And so the motivation is different, isn't it?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I wasn't like totally, yes, I was focused on architecture, but it's kind of hard to describe, but like, I'm sure we've all got this to some degree, but you have an idea of something that you want to achieve, but you give yourself bandwidth to be able to invite things in to sort of to inform your decisions, I guess, but you've got a sort of a firm hand on the rudder of the ship, so to speak. So you can turn it if you need to, and that's a thing I to this day, still try to grapple with and understand and get better at.
Let's talk about, Simon, that journey that you took. You said it was a sort of a cliche journey of going into the continent of Europe and finding yourself when you were in between your high school and university days. Can you recall in your mind a moment when you found yourself, or a moment where you decided what you were going to do once you returned to Australia? Was it a particular city or a particular visual you were looking at that said, right, I think I'm going to really focus on doing this for the next chapter of my life?
I was actually, so as I was mentioning before, flew over to Prague and sort of, backpacked sort of my way across Western Europe. I came into Berlin. I mean, two things sort of happened, actually. So the one thing was, yes, I'd always been doing art, for instance, and I at that point I had done some study into colour theory, which was interesting because it's a very technical side of art, basically. I sort of love that sort of area and the technical side of creativity, so to speak. So anyway, I arrived in Berlin and I fell in love with the buildings and the culture and the cities. The city's beautiful. I came across a beautiful building by an architect called Daniel Libeskind, and it's a building which is the Jewish Holocaust Museum. Beautiful building. It's basically the swastika carved up like someone's put it on the table and sort of hacked at it and then shifted all of the arms that fly out from the swastika in different directions and stack them, and that creates the sort of circulation for this entire museum. It's really fascinating. And there's spaces in there where there's a room that someone lets you in. There's this huge door, and they let you in, and they close the door, and it is completely dark, and there's not an ounce of light anywhere except for this little tiny hole way up in the ceiling, and it tries to recreate the sense of foreboding and and feeling of just being lost and you're worthless almost, because they're trying to not only have a museum for some event, but impart some sort of understanding on the visitor of what it really was like being in that time of history and being one of the survivors potentially too. So I found that fascinating. I was just like, okay, wow, this is an experiential place and experiential design. And so that's how I fell in love with architecture. It's actually with that building. So, I mean, that's what really got me interested. And another thing is that I ran into this I was thinking about this a couple of days ago. I ran into some guy on the street who was was doing like fortune telling and all that sort of stuff. And so I've got the piece of paper still here with me to this day. You write down like your age and, like favorite color, I think it was, and your, passion. And then you hold the paper and put it in your pocket, whatever. And then he works it out, and he basically reproduced the same thing on another piece of paper. And I was 20, I think it was 20 years old. Favorite colors were like blue, and then passion at that point was architecture. And so he wrote that down, and I was flummoxed.
Wow.
Because it was like, wow, that's just aligned with exactly what I've just been thinking about and feeling. And then on the flip side of it, like the fact that I've been read like a book. It's like, well, I need to not only follow my passion, but I need to challenge that, hopefully as much as I can on a daily basis from there on. So I've sort of lived by those sort of feelings, principles, maybe.
Wow, that's fascinating. Do you think if you had not have had these solo trips, as you've expressed, in Europe, going around Czechia and Germany and places like that when you were 20, do you think your life would have taken a different direction, or do you think you would have ended up settling down for architecture anyway?
That's an interesting question. I think I'm on some sort of right, course, so to speak, some sort of right direction. It's just a matter of how quickly you can. I mean, I don't know. I guess it's different for different people, right? But I think it's important if you can refine your passion in a meaningful and methodological in a sort of a quick way, because we've only got so many years of to live, right?
Yeah.
Not to sound foreboding or anything like that, but I think if I hadn't gone through all my life experiences, which allowed me to understand myself as an individual better, it would have been a slower process, and I may be, now today would be halfway to where I am now. If I hadn't gone to university, perhaps. But then again, I don't know. Experiences have come along and can change mindsets. So, but definitely creativity. I'm interested in design and creativity. It's an energizer of mine. It gets me interested in whatever I'm doing. I do software development and design now in my job as well as designing buildings. So whatever it is, creativity is what sparks my flame.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that, because I was doing a podcast recording earlier today with a British guy who's since moved to Italy about 18 months ago. And he said that being in a foreign country and experiencing a new place and immersing himself in a new culture has really reignited a lot of his creative flames from, when he was younger, when he was into music and writing creatively and stuff like that. And it's the same for me. When I'm in a place that is unfamiliar, my brain seems to be fed with so much new stimuli that it's charged, and I feel like I need to release that through creativity. Do you have any kind of comment on that?
Yeah, well, I listened to a really interesting podcast, I think it was a couple of months ago, but they were talking about creativity and for regards to poets and famous songwriters. And they went through a couple of songwriters, but how they explained when they get a good idea. And I think they were talking about Tom Waits, a famous singer-songwriter. I think that he's since passed, but he lived in LA. And he would be stuck in traffic in his great big, Cadillac. And he had this comment about how he would have a great idea and it would come flying down from the sky. And he would explain this whole process. And it would be coming down. And as it sort of flows through him, he would be trying to find a pen and paper, just trying to grab it. And he could feel it slipping through. And he said how he would grab by its tail, just as it's trying to try to like fly down and maybe go through the next car and give someone that idea instead of him. And so he would have to like drag it back in by the tail and then grab its legs and then absorb it. And just it was just really fascinating how they sort of, what's the word, like made a physical form of creativity like that. I find it fascinating.
Yeah. I've been thinking more recently about what university life must be like for students right now with this whole lockdown and basically being stuck at home and not going into the campus and doing all their classes through Zoom and e-learning and stuff like that. I mean, that I don't think would work very well for me. I'm just very curious as to how students are coping with that. I was wondering with you, Simon, if you were someone who went straight through to uni. I know you were saying that you had to do a bridging course and everything because your high school grades weren't up to standard to get into architecture in the first place. But do you think having that traveling experience before you went to university enabled you to be like a better student, if that makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for those reasons I alluded to earlier on, with giving your like kind of like having that beer, that sitting there with a good beer instead of just a goon bag. I mean, you can have a good wine or whatever's your flavor, but savoring the moment and understanding where and what you feel you should be doing with your life, and being privileged and grateful. I mean, I think gratitude is something we need to learn much, much, much earlier than we do. And I think that's the problem with people going from school straight into university. They feel like they're just keeping up with the status quo, just rolling on, but we don't work that way. And having a feeling of gratitude and taking that into whatever you do in life will give you the tools and inspiration to really reach out for the things that matter most to you. And so you apply yourself, obviously out of that process. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting you said that, the whole savouring the moment quote. I see that as a very mature thing to say and to conduct yourself with or abide by. That seems like a very wise and something you would acquire with age. And here you are as a 20-year-old savouring a dark-coloured beer amongst students who probably have never even considered the idea of savouring the moment before because they've never had that. They haven't had lived long enough, perhaps, but also perhaps they hadn't travelled like you. Because with me, and I would assume for most travellers, when you go away, on your own, for example, and you spend a decent amount of time abroad, everything kind of slows down and you can kind of think a lot and ponder yourself and what's important to you. The whole slowing down enables you to find happiness in the smallest things and, like you say, to savor the moment. I mean, that's what life is all about, right? It's just little moments and then little memories that accumulate to when you're an older person and you can just be nostalgic and reflect on all these wonderful, wonderful things that happened, be grateful for all those opportunities that came by.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you can get into like stoicism is sort of fascinating to me as well. Taking it every moment is really important. My wife she's a yoga teacher, and I've only done yoga like a handful of times, probably countable on one hand, to be honest. But I do appreciate the fact that you can be sitting, just the moment where you just sit and just close your eyes and just listen to the things around you, take it in. Be informed by what's happening around you. Cut out the noise. It's really important, and it's a life preserver too. It's not just a sort of a whack job idea. It's something that can really, it's super beneficial for professional life, for sort of giving you direction as well for everything you do in life. I think it's really important to take a step back and enjoy a good beer, or smell the roses, as they say.
Simon, if there are any younger people listening at the moment who are finishing high school or perhaps are in the middle of university, and when travel becomes possible again and they're really itching to go somewhere, but perhaps they don't know where, could you recommend any destinations that were valuable in your traveling journey that you could say, well, I suggest you might go here and smell the roses?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, there's so many places, right? I mean, it's crazy. There's so many great places. I mean, right now, if you can, during the pandemic, just get in your car or just get on your bike, whatever, or go for a run and get out. I mean, even there's the talk about the 15-minute neighbourhood within your radius of wherever you live. Just get out there and interact with as many people as possible. It sounds kind of silly, like, oh, we've got to get on a plane and fly across the world. But even just doing that is really, really important and a great experience. But there are places, like over in Greece, a couple of beautiful islands like Skiathos and Skopilos. Went there for my honeymoon, and it was another moment that was breathtaking. I was on an ATV with my wife that we just married just a week earlier, on an ATV going around the island, and we had to pull over because they had this great big herd of sheep were sort of going around the bend of the island by themselves because they just had done this for years and years and probably decades and just learned from one another as the herd sort of shrunk and grew and shrunk and grew. But anyway, because there was no human around, they were just moving around and it was dusk. We just sat back and just sort of like, we felt like to begin with, like, oh, I've got to get around these sheep. But we were just like, let's just sit and just watch and enjoy this Mediterranean island, this herd of sheep that are just doing their thing. Let's not interrupt them. And just take in the moment, savor it, just drink the moment. So anyway, Greece, Mediterranean islands, wow, fantastic. Croatia, wow. The food there, the seafood is amazing. The olive oil there is so thick. It's like honey. It's like a molasses almost. It's so thick, so good. And the water is beautiful, pristine. Croatia is beautiful. And during my studies in university, I'd like to add, I went on exchange for my second last year over in Switzerland. And I highly, 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 highly recommend going on exchange. If you can't do a gap year, definitely do an exchange, but do both if you can. So I lived over in the lower part of Switzerland in a canton called Ticino, and I had to learn Italian really quickly, and because I had to present in Italian, present architectural models and ideas in Italian, which was hard. But challenge yourself, go traveling to another country that doesn't necessarily speak English as their primary language, and actually by doing that you'll find some gems that you wouldn't necessarily see if you're just sticking to an all English sort of speaking path. So definitely Mediterranean. Costa Rica is beautiful. There's a little town called Montezuma. We used to call it Montefuma because you go there. It's on the west coast of. It's on this little peninsula in Costa Rica, and there's a little town. Yeah, there's a little town called Montezuma, and on the beach there's so much weed everywhere. It's just crazy. And there's not many houses around. There's this great big pub on the end of the beach in Montezuma, and that thing's lit up, and you can be at the other end on the sand, just enjoying the stellar night sky down there, and have a drink down the water, and maybe a spliff, and then talking about. So that's a lot of fun. Talking about night skies, if you want to really have a beautiful night sky, New Zealand has one of the World Heritage listed areas for observing the night sky. in the world, right in the middle of the South Island, near a lake called Lake Tekapo. I'm sure I'm pronouncing that all wrong because the Kiwis listening to this, they'll correct me, I'm sure. But there is an amazing night sky to appreciate there. And there's an outdoor, natural hot springs there that are really well maintained, really good facilities, actually. It's just beautiful. So go there by yourself or take a loved one or, find someone special there too. I mean, it's a beautiful spot.
Brilliant. All very good suggestions. And I got the impression that they're all pretty much beaches except for Switzerland. So I can there's still a bit of Aussie left in you there, Simon. Anyway, it's time for my favourite four. So I've just got a few quick-fire questions, Simon, that I want to ask you about 4 of your favourite things.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What is your favourite piece of clothing?
Favorite piece of clothing? In Thailand, there is these pants that are fantastic they're just so flexible where it's quite baggy, but they sort of wrap around you almost like a sarong, but they're not. They are literally pants and they have a string that ties around. They just allow you to strip down, jump in the seat or, get them on and go up to the markets to get a feed. Just very casual, and they just speak to the experience of living in Thailand. Just super chill.
They sound very comfortable as well.
Yeah.
What is your favorite foreign word?
Well, I just think of swear words now.
Well, that's fine. You wouldn't be the first person.
Or Vaffanculo, which is...
It's not a nice thing to say. Yeah, Italian cursing. Is that something you said in the architectural office a few times?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. With a little bit of hand gestures too. Really puts it across.
Do you have a favorite geographical landmark?
Oh, that's hard.
You've been too many places. It's hard to narrow it down, isn't it?
So can it be like natural or?
Sure.
There, when I was studying in Switzerland, there was a mountain called a Monte Gerosso, and that when I first got there, I was like, I'm going to climb that thing, and packed a lunch and went for it. But I used to always, while studying there, I always look at it and think, I went to there, and I went, especially in the middle of winter when the whole thing's covered in snow. I would think, I climbed the top of that thing, and so I'll get through this. Course that I'm doing right now, what I'm worrying about right now. So put things in perspective. It was a good little driver.
Nice. And finally, do you have a favorite song?
Oh, probably. I've been listening to a lot of 70s rock right now. It's been really good.
Nice. Bit of nostalgia.
Yeah. I didn't grow up in the 70s, but definitely 70s rock. I think everyone grew up with it at some point, right? To be honest, because it's such good music. Right now, I get in a weird habit the last year and a half at least. I've been listening every time I go for a run. I'd put on, Guardians of the Galaxy soundtrack. Man, that's so good. And it's just like the best of the best. 70s, early 80s rock. It's good.
Nice.
Definitely do it.
Nice.
Energize
cool,
it for
man.
Sure.
My favorite 4. All right, I got a couple of things left, and then I know you have to get ready for your meeting this morning. But I was just curious, personally, Simon, with your career and getting jobs and progressing forward, do you think your international travel experience and experience studying abroad, living abroad, and working abroad has been an advantage for you when you've been going for a job? And do you think sometimes perhaps that will be the point that gets you the job over somebody else who maybe has the same kind of qualifications, same kind of career experience, but perhaps hasn't had that life experience?
Yeah, totally. I mean, at the end of the day, with more experience, one gains better understanding of their thoughts and belief systems. And I mean, that's really what an interview is all about, right? They're trying to understand what are your beliefs, what are your ideas, what can you give to the company that you're interested to work for. Just like in a social setting, to be honest, we all do it consciously or subconsciously, but there is some sort of trying to create a connection between individuals. Just in a corporate sense, they're trying to make a buck. That's the difference. But so yeah, traveling and getting out there and pushing and just challenging your beliefs and your potential, then that really gives you these sort of tools for sitting in front of a potential employer to sort of frame your mindset to achieve what you're ultimately trying to achieve, which is getting that job. You know what I mean? I think that's really important to have. That's how life experiences are underestimated by a long shot, but I think it's slowly changing.
That's good to know. It's good to know. Now, I'm aware, Simon, during these pandemic days, you bought a vehicle and you've been traveling around California with your wife. I was just curious, as things start to open up again and things start to normalize again, do you have any plans of where you might go next, whether that's within the USA or abroad?
Yeah, I trying to work that out. We had planned to go to Peru, actually, and go to Machu Picchu, but that was for last year, and the pandemic sort of put that all on hold. So we're really itching to get out, and we have done a couple of road trips. We went to Yellowstone, which is beautiful. If you haven't been to Yellowstone, it's fantastic. It's sort of the first ever amusement park really ever built, because it was around a natural space. So definitely go there. But the thing about going to Hawaii and going to some of the islands there, there's some beautiful different sort of climates you can appreciate in Hawaii. It's not just about sun and surf, but I guess there's the volcanic mountain ranges, and some of those mountains go way up, and there's some stellar views and night skies to be appreciated there as well. So I think that's next on the books, going to Hawaii.
Awesome. That sounds intriguing, mate, and a place that I'd be curious to visit at some point in my life as well. My parents have been there 4 or 5 times, I think, something ridiculous like that. Me still yet to go, but one day could be a nice place to explore too.
Nice.
Well, Simon, I know you have to get ready for a meeting this morning, but I just wanted to say thanks for the chat. It's been really nice catching up, and I hope you enjoyed coming on the Nostalgic Vagabond podcast.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Nostalgic Vagabond. I hope you enjoyed listening to our conversation, and if you would like to listen to other interesting talks on travel, there are more podcasts available. Check them out wherever you get your podcasts. And for updates, just follow me at the Nostalgic V. Don't forget, your journey is special. Own it. I've been Alan Hill. Until next time. Hey guys, if you enjoy listening to the Nostalgic Vagabond, why not support the podcast? If you haven't already, subscribe and you'll be notified when new eps drop. You can also support the podcast by leaving a rating or a review on your podcast app. Why not share this episode? Tell your friends about it if something resonated with you. Word of mouth is great promotion. If you're into social media, maybe post a screenshot of the episode or upload the link on your profile so your mates can see what interesting content you've been into lately. All your support comes straight back and helps to keep the travel content and nostalgia of this podcast going. Cheers. So don't forget to subscribe.